Hi, and welcome to what I think is one of the more incredible interviews I've ever had the privilege of facilitating. We have Kim Campbell, the author of Flying in the Face of Fear, a fighter pilot's lessons for leading with courage, a remarkable individual, a remarkable book. Kim, welcome to the interview. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I mentioned to you that I read this book in two sittings, which frankly is hard to find the time to do that nowadays. And it was just gripping. Your story from childhood through your tenacity to continue to fight to get into the Air Force Academy, to, of course, I think that central story, the flight over Baghdad, just gripping from beginning to end. And the frosting on the cake were just some great leadership lessons. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with all of us. We're better for it.
Oh, absolutely. I looking back on my career, I realized how many people shared their stories. They were willing to share their experiences with me. And I just felt this responsibility almost to do the same. I recognize that not everybody's going to go fly a fighter jet, but I want them to I want people to be able to share in some of the lessons that we learned, some of the things that were really valuable for me, not just as a pilot, but as a leader as well.
What a great, you stole the lead there. My first question was, hey, what's the purpose of this book? What's behind it? So what a great statement. Just as a sidebar, I work and live now up on a lake, and I'm doing a lot of things with equipment and the tractors and trailers and things like that. And I always joke to my dad or my wife that I should never be a pilot because it's inevitable that I forget something important, like, hey, did I actually, put the safety chains on the trailer on the car or not? So my hat's off to anybody who can do what you do.
Well, the good news is that we have checklists. And if you go through the checklist, that's what the intent is, so that you don't forget something like that, something that's really important. And I'm a big fan of the checklist, and also, the more you practice, the more it becomes kind of second nature. The more there's muscle memory, it makes it easier to not forget those really important things.
So the checklist is fabulous. I've written an article about that before. I think it's good. I should practice what I preach because that would help me remember the safety chains on the trailer and those things. One of the other areas that jumped out at me that I loved in the book was your reference to journaling and how powerful that is. So talk a little bit about that. I think it's a great tool for leaders at all levels.
Yeah, it's one of those things it wasn't something that was in my normal practice. And before I left on my very first deployment, one of my mentors said, take a journal with you, just jot some notes down. What were you thinking? What are those lessons that you learned? And that's a lot of where this started, was looking back at that journal and thinking through, the hard things that I went through, kind of the memories, but also there were key lessons in there. And sometimes life is happening so fast, things are so busy, you kind of get overwhelmed. The journal was a time for me at the end of the day to decompress a little bit, to let my frustrations go. With sometimes the missions were frustrating. And also, I will say, to let some of my fears be put on a piece of paper where I could acknowledge it at a time when I wasn't comfortable sharing them with anyone else. And so I really enjoyed it. It was an experience for me to just let go. It was a way to decompress at the end of the day. But now, having the benefit of having that journal and looking back and recognizing the importance of having those lessons, and then now being able to share them with others. So I think it's a practice that has been really helpful for me to decompress, to just let things go.
I love your description. I think it's the lowest cost, frankly, easiest self-improvement, continuous improvement tool that any of us can adopt in our lives. So, I have to ask the challenging question: do you continue to journal in your post-Air Force, post-pilot life?
In a different way.
Okay.
Yeah, I do it in a different way. I also now have 2 kids, and that's probably why I should journal even more, because they keep me busy. They keep me on my toes, that's for sure. But I've learned to do it in a way that works for me, because I felt like I almost was too exhausted, too tired at the end of the day. So now I find ways to journal both written, but also I speak into my phone at times.
Nice, nice.
In a program that allows me to kind of jot down some thoughts, what I'm thinking. It's amazing what technology can do. Then you can send it to yourself on an email. There's lots of different ways. So yeah, I've given myself some grace and figuring out what works for me now.
So for my reluctant clients, and there may be many listening, reluctant on the journaling front. Yeah, not reluctant about me, reluctant on the journaling front. One of the things that I encourage is a simple approach. At the beginning of the day, take a few minutes and jot down, what do I need to do to succeed at every encounter today? And think through those behaviors. I want to listen fiercely. I want to really focus. I want to create value in every encounter. And we're humans, so at the end of the day, we have a chance to debrief. And I do like to end it positively, though. I like them to ask questions. What worked great that I want to do more of tomorrow? And not necessarily preoccupy on any of the things because things always go wrong. We don't live up to that 100%, but it's a powerful technique to get people jump started. So
I like it. It sets the intention for the day. I have this is my now journal notebook, Air Force.
I see that.
But it's just my kind of thoughts of things that I need to accomplish. And then the one thing that you mentioned is, at the end of the day, I do a little debrief with myself. And this is something that I learned from flying, but I debrief kind of how I did. What were my objectives for today? Right. Which ones did I get done? Which ones did I not do? Why? Really kind of think, well, why, was it too much today? How did I do on those? But I give myself a little debrief. These are things that don't take a lot of time. They can sound time consuming, but, just a few minutes to bring intentionality to your day and then to really think through what did I do?
What a great practice for everyone. Thank you for sharing that. So kind of a personal note as a reader of the book. Again, love the book from cover to cover, and there's no but coming. I did find your journal entries to be the most powerful and authentic part of the entire book. They were really good.
I'll be honest, I was a little bit nervous about including them. I mean, they're not, first off, that's not the best English. It's not the best writing in some ways.
That was what made it authentic.
Exactly. But I realized it really, it brought me back when I read those journal entries. It was kind of what I'm feeling in this moment right now, and the fears and the doubts and the different, the different things that were going on. And so I just was like, well, my book is about facing your fears and leading with courage. This is it right here. Is I need to be vulnerable. I need to share those things, even if it's a little bit vulnerable for me to put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, opportunity, if you have a lot of those journals there, that could be a follow-on product. It would be fascinating, maybe even a great audio book. So, all right. So you remember, advice is worth what you pay for it. So I love the journal entries. They were great. So, so kind of a key question. And again, the goal that I always have in these interviews is to help translate someone's great ideas into kind of tangible, actionable items for the individuals in my audiences. And the first thing that jumps out is, let's maybe get clear on what a fighter pilot's mindset is. Help us who haven't had the benefit of all your training and background understand that. What does that mean?
I think when when I first started flying, there was this idea of a fighter pilot that was like this search for perfection. It was this constantly excelling. It was also like this big ego and sense of confidence. And what I realized over time is that really that's not what it was about. I mean, there is that drive for perfection, but I think we also recognize that it's likely impossible to achieve perfection on every mission. And so we have learned to adjust and adapt. And for me, a fighter pilot mindset, it's similar to a growth mindset in many ways. It is this idea of, we are going to make mistakes and fail, and how can we learn from them? How can we put ourselves out there so that each mission, each time we perform, we're always trying to get better? It's this focus on continuous improvement. It is a drive to excel and to help others on our team also excel. So it's not just about us, it's about lifting others so we elevate the performance of the team. But it is a focus on learning from failures, repeating successes, and sharing it with others to elevate the performance of a team.
I mean, what a great leadership philosophy to bring to any environment, whether you're managing the front lines or you're at the top of an organization. That's just a great perspective. Yours is a bit kinder and gentler than the individual I think you had cited. I believe the word cocky, and there were a couple of other bold claims that defined that historic view on fighter pilots' mindset.
Well, I mean, there is a confidence, right? We want to be confident in what we're doing, but I think behind that confidence is credibility, a willingness to learn and grow. We actually use the terms, it is what we teach at the Air Force Weapons School, and it is the best instructors, the best fighter pilots are humble, approachable, and credible. And that kind of defies what most people think about fighter pilots. But it's true from the fighter pilots that I've worked with that have been my leaders. The best ones were humble. They recognized that they always had room to grow, that they weren't just content to, stay where they were at. They wanted to get better. They were always pushing in their performance. They were approachable. They were willing to ask, answer questions, willing to just talk about their lessons learned, to share their failures. That's what struck me as like, that's who I want to be. I want to be humble. I want to be approachable. And the credibility underlines everything.
Sure. Oh, fantastic. So, I mean, if you think about it, most of our perspectives on the life of a fighter pilot comes from Top Gun.
Of course. Which is a great movie.
Did you like the movie? I have to ask you, did you like the movie as an Air Force pilot?
I love the movie. It is not always authentic in every way, but that's okay. It's entertainment value. And there are some really great concepts that kind of come through.
Okay. All right. I've seen the most recent one twice. I'll probably watch it again. I like it as well. All right, so you've hinted at that humility issue and reflecting on mistakes. You talk in the book about the fighter pilot debrief process. I have been in the corporate world and around the corporate world for a long time, 25 years as a senior executive or an executive or a manager, and another 15 years serving as a coach and consultant. And I rarely see the quality of the debrief and the humility and the willingness of junior, in this case, junior officers to speak to senior, junior managers to speak to senior executives openly about what they're seeing wrong. I rarely see that. So talk about that, and how can we bring that into our organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, that debrief is one of the things that was so powerful during my time flying, but then I took and used throughout my leadership roles as well. And a debrief really only works if we have a safe space where people feel safe to provide the feedback without blame, without shame. It means that we check our rank or our ego at the door so that we can have that environment where, again, people will raise their hand and talk to potentially more senior people on the mission or the flight or in a presentation or a briefing, whatever it may be, to provide that feedback. We talk about our objectives. We talk about those things we did well so that we can repeat them the next time. And then we really drill down into the mistakes that we made. Where did things go wrong? But it's not like the easy, quick answer of like, okay, that went wrong. Generally, I've seen we tend to blame people. But if we actually took the time to drill down into the root cause, be that 2-year-old that says why, and continue to drill down into the root cause, then we pull the true lessons learned, and then we figure out what we're going to do differently the next time. For us, we walk out of that debrief. I think we're better pilots, we're better aviators, we're better leaders. And then the key is then we share that with the rest of our team. So it's not just the people in that room that learn, we share the broader lessons with the rest of the team. It allows us to focus on continuous improvement, and it ensures we're not rigid, that we can't change our behavior. It allows us to be flexible in a changing environment. It truly is a fantastic technique to focus on failing forward, where we learn from mistakes and failures. But it takes time. It takes commitment.
I think the world will, world of organizations would be a much better place if we could adopt that. If you kind of juxtapose that great concept on Gallup's horrendous engagement numbers, where approximately two-thirds of the people in organizations are not engaged, and they have a 70% causal tie-in to the role of the manager. It seems like there's not a lot of people with that level of humility, with that level of maturity. The good news is we have an opportunity to teach and to coach in that area. So
absolutely. And it starts with the leader kind of setting the example, and people seeing that it is okay to say, hey, I made this mistake, or I didn't do this as well. And here's why. I think it really does start with the leader. But I mean, sometimes we feel like these kind of things take so much time and we don't have time for it. I mean, this can be as simple as doing just a quick team huddle. If you feel like you don't have the time to sit down and do that debrief, do a quick team huddle. If nothing else, talk through how the day went, how the briefing went, how the negotiation went.
Right.
It's important to just reflect so that you can do it better the next time.
Great lesson. So I have to ask, and is there an Air Force term for a mission that just went horribly wrong? Somewhere out of the military, the phrase FUBAR shows up, which we won't repeat what that is. It's a family.
There's a few of them, and I don't know that any of them are great.
Okay, got it. All right. So what if it was one of those missions? Have you observed scenarios where individuals kind of get a little pushback, or there's the finger pointing starts emerging, because that happens in organizations all of the time?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. We often put ourselves in these missions that are high threat, high risk, lots of players. We're putting ourselves in a more stressful situation that often occurs at something called red flag, which is our biggest exercise that ideally prepares pilots, aviators to go to combat. We experience kind of the stress and all the chaos in a relatively safe training environment. But before we go fly the mission, we do a very thorough brief. We fly the mission, and then we do a very thorough debrief. And the debrief, there are times I've seen where people kind of start the finger pointing, and it is on the person running the debrief to immediately call it out. And that's not the route that we're going to take. That's not the path we're going to go down. And to really focus on those lessons and focus on drilling down into the root cause of some of the mistakes. So it's on the person running the debrief. The debrief doesn't always have to be run by the most senior person in the room. We can involve various people by allowing them to run the debrief, but it does have to be someone with some credibility that has the courage to step up and make sure that debrief is run well.
Operative word there, the courage to step up and do that. Again, great example. I love that whole process. All right, so one of the other key concepts of many in the book that you introduce is this idea of creating a wingman culture. Help translate for the rest of us that haven't had your experience in the Air Force. What do we mean by a wingman culture?
Well, one of the things about a fighter squadron and this wingman culture is this idea we all understand the role that we play. We each have a role on our mission. We understand our responsibilities. We also understand where we fit into the bigger picture, how our individual success is critical for team success. It's the idea of being part of something bigger and more important than yourself. And the role you play, how you fit into the bigger picture. To me, I think that's critical on any team, that you have this mindset of, I have to do my job well so the team performs well. Part of that is on leadership to be able to help people understand at all levels of the organization where they fit, how they contribute, what is the role that they play. That I think is what helps us understand this idea of being a wingman. It is also about providing mutual support to others, so that when someone's not doing their role well, for whatever reason that may be, personal, professional, that we step in. We have their back, we provide support, we also hold them accountable.
It seemed analogous as I was reading it and thinking about it to the U.S. Navy SEALs, the swim buddy concept, which kind of jumped out at me. Someone to call you on your baloney, but someone to be there when you need that help and support and to cover you.
Yeah, I think, I look back to some of my most difficult missions, and having that wingman that could step in if I was feeling overwhelmed, that had the bigger picture, that had the situational awareness that I didn't, because I was solely focused in the airplane on flying my airplane. But I think, that's the kind of thing we need in life as well. We need somebody to have our back. We
I
need
agree.
somebody on our team, especially if you're in a senior leadership position where you don't have a whole lot of people at your level. Who is going to be the person that will call you out when you need it? Who is going to be the person that you can trust, that you can rely on, that will have your back?
So critical. And we know that those at the top of our organizations tend to get the least amount of feedback, and even the feedback might be of questionable quality. Building that wingman culture, I think, could go a long way towards curing that.
Absolutely.
Love the philosophy. So, one of the themes that comes through it, and you mentioned it with respect to your journaling, and this notion is facing fear and moving beyond fear, or embracing it, however you want to term it. Help us get better at that, because I run into managers and leaders and executives all of the time, whether it's the fear of taking a bold move on a strategic level at the top, or the fear of suggesting a unique idea to innovate a process or a product. That fear is everywhere, and it really is, as Frank Herbert said in that great book Dune, the mind killer. So how do we take your lessons and get better at dealing with fear?
That's so, it's so true, right? We all face fear, right? We face those doubts, we face uncertainty. It's the fear of failure, the fear of change, the fear of trying something new, fear of getting outside your comfort zone. I look back on my career and I realize there were many times that I felt that way. For me, I've recognized that one, I need to put in the work before, right? If I know something stressful is coming up, I know I'm going to have to make a critical decision. I can see this important negotiation or briefing or something coming. I put in the work. For me, it's all about doing the work, the preparation, do your homework, do the research. What hasn't worked in the past? What are those lessons learned that we can pull on from previous debriefs? I'm a big fan of the next step, which is really kind of the practice piece, which for me is visualization.
Okay.
I really like to think through some of those difficult scenarios. If I have to have a difficult conversation with a teammate, I will visualize and think through how that conversation will go. If I have an important briefing or presentation, I practice it. I practice it by myself. I practice it in front of others. So I think practice visualization is key. And then I've also learned to spend some time thinking about kind of the worst case scenarios. I'm going to plan for contingencies, because once I think through those things and I have a plan to deal with them, then I can let it go. Otherwise, I tend to, I start kind of working myself up, and here comes that fear. So I take the time to really think through those hard things. And then in the moment, ideally in that moment, you have a little bit more confidence because you put in the work. You are more confident when you put in the work, and then that breeds confidence. And in that moment, it is all about, take that deep breath, step up and take action because you've put in the work.
So is the putting in the work, your chair flying, I think is the phrase that shows up in the book?
Yes, that is part of practice. So chair flying is a technique that I learned in aviation. It is how I survived pilot training. But every night before a mission, I would sit in a chair and I would visualize the steps like I was in the cockpit. I would think through the radio calls. I would think through the parameters. And it gave me confidence to get in the airplane the next morning, because I kind of felt like I had already been there. I'd done it already. I had thought through those tough things. And when I chair fly, if there's something I don't know, well, I pull out the book, I look it up, or I jot a note down. I need to ask that person that question before I go through with this. And I've realized that this chair flying thing, it's really just visualization, but it's an opportunity for me to think through that stressful thing before it occurs. And I started taking that into my personal and professional life. I, as a leader, if I had to make an important announcement or have a difficult conversation with somebody on my team, I essentially chair flew it before I did it, so that I would have that confidence going into the situation.
Are you able to practice that as a parent? I think you had mentioned you have 2 children.
Oh yeah. I have 2 boys. They are very soon to be 11 and 15.
Ooh, okay.
And especially my teenager, we're trying to sort things out. Where do you let them go? How far do you let them go? Where do you rein them back in? And Yeah, my husband and I actually chair fly together, and then we debrief together. My husband was also an A10
Oh, yeah,
pilot.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Fantastic
yeah,
reference to him.
we
And
use those things all the time. We
that's
brief, we
cool.
talk about what we're going to do. We kind of do that quick chair fly. How are we going to have this
Mhm,
conversation? What might work? What might not? And then after it's all said and done, we'll debrief and go,
mhm.
well, that didn't go so well.
That happens a lot with children. So as the father of a 35-year-old and a 32-year-old, we're really happy they're incredible young men and good humans at this point. But it was questionable during those teen years. So
Yeah, yeah. Do whatever you can to,
yeah, absolutely,
it's
absolutely. If
probably some of the most
by the way,
challenging things.
someday they'll recognize whatever the phrase is, from hero to genuine badass, what their mom is all about. So they may not see it at the moment. They'll get that someday.
Yeah, I'm not, I mean, in their minds, I don't think, they don't think I'm very cool. I'm there. That's all right.
Yeah, that's funny. So I suppose without I mean the central, tension in the book is that moment over Baghdad. And I want people to read it because I think that they'll really benefit from that. But fear was a factor, and I believe you described facing three types of fear during that. Without giving away the whole, we don't want to have the spoiler alert here. We don't want to give away the whole story. Can you talk a little bit about those three types of fear and how you worked through each of them?
Yeah, that mission was such a challenging moment in my life, but um, I never wanted to admit how hard it was or how scared I was in that moment. Um, I was worried that it would like show a sign of weakness. And what I've realized is that, it is about what you do in the face of
Mhm.
fear. It's about what you do in those moments. And I've had some time to kind of reflect and look at it. And I realized that I wasn't just scared once, there were kind of these different moments of different
Mhm.
types of fear. And first was this immediate fear. When my airplane was hit with a missile, there was immediate fear. I didn't think about it. I just had to react. But
Right.
I could hear the fear in my voice. And that is this, in the moment, you might be scared or afraid, but you have to be able to take action. Again, that goes back for me. I fell back on training and preparation,
Right.
and I was able to take action. Um, this next type of fear, as I was flying my airplane home and thinking about what was to come, was this big decision I had to make. Do I land? Do I eject? And this was now where I had plenty of time to think about the fact that I was scared. I knew I was scared. I was anxious. I was stressed. I was worried. I was kind of all of these things. To me, this is like when we have time to think about it. We think pros and cons. We think worst case scenarios. For me, many
I mean,
situations.
for those, I guess it is a little bit of a spoiler, but for those who can't relate to this, it was a life or death decision. You're looking for the least bad option there, right? You could
Right.
eject, end up in enemy territory. That's bad. You could eject, and there were all sorts of reasons why that could go horribly wrong. Or you could land, and in the mode that you were in, which I want to talk about in a minute, that could go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, it was a big decision, and I had an hour to make the decision, which for me at the time felt like way too much time. Like it was the longest hour of my life.
Oh,
And sometimes when you're in those situations where you're scared, you've got to make a decision, you can start overthinking things. You think
mhm.
about all those things you can't control. And I've realized like I still feel fear in this way today when I'm not flying A10s anymore, but I realize those moments where the fear kind of drags on. It's preparing for an important briefing or presentation. It's those difficult conversations. It's,
Sure.
making a big change in an organization. And I'll think through them, and I catch myself if I start to overthink, if I start to get worried about it. I go back to the lessons I learned in combat, which is focus on what is most important and focus on what I can control. And then that third type of fear for me was just the living with the decision of like,
Mhm.
I felt confident in my decision. I made the decision I'm going to try to land this airplane, but I was still nervous about how it would play out. It was kind of like, how is this going to end?
Right.
I'm confident in my decision. I feel good about it, but I'm still nervous. And I realized that today, when I'm leading organizations and I make a policy change, or I know I'm going to make a decision that will impact my team, not everybody's going to like it. I'm confident because I've put in all the work, but there's still that little bit of nervousness or fear of like, how is this actually going to play out? How is this going to turn out? What are people going to think? Um,
Yeah, Kim,
And
I
I
think
just
this,
realized that,
this
we do face fears. We
sure,
face different types
this
of
part of
fears.
your book and how you navigated it is probably the most powerful part of the book. And I think the lessons we can take. Fear keeps us from doing so many things. It really stops so many people from doing things that they want to do, or pursuing those great strategies or whatever it happens to be. So yeah, a great lesson. So you had to shift to something called manual reversion mode. So again, little translation for the rest of us on what that is, because it sounded horrifying.
Well, when my airplane was hit by the missile,
Right.
it instantly depleted and dumped out all of the hydraulics from the airplane. Hydraulics is what allows us to fly an
Sure.
airplane.
Sure.
Thankfully, the A-10 has an emergency backup system. It is built, if you lose one hydraulic system, the other takes over. If you lose both, then we have this backup emergency system called manual reversion. And it is simply cranks, cables, and pulleys that allow you to fly the aircraft under this manual mechanical mode.
No power steering there?
It's like driving a dump truck or a semi truck without power steering. So it flew. That's what I cared about, but it was much harder, much heavier to fly. And I had an hour to fly it back in that condition.
And then landing was a whole new game, right? I know.
Yeah.
We're covering the whole story. Just like I said, I didn't want it. The story is so powerful.
I'm trying not to tell
Yeah.
all the parts. But we flew in manual reversion just once during our initial training, just to get a feel for how hard it was to fly the airplane. But we never practiced landing in manual reversion. It was deemed too dangerous to practice in training. And so it's not something that we practiced at all. Our checklist actually says attempt under ideal conditions only, which is kind of funny because I don't know how you get into that situation and it'd be ideal. So I knew that trying to land was a risk, but I had an hour to fly the airplane. I had a very experienced wingman with me, providing that mutual support.
Nice.
And I felt confident after that hour that I could land the airplane safely.
Were there recordings, and have you listened to recordings of your dialogue from that event?
We record everything we do
Yeah.
in the cockpit, and this mission was no different. And I went back and listened to the recordings, and that's really when I realized how scared I actually was, because I can hear that fear in my voice, and I can hear the fear and the conversation and the dialogue as we make it back, and I can hear kind of that sense of doubt and concern, and then it's interesting. It's like the confidence builds as I go. I mean, I just talking through everything with my wingman, walking through everything, evaluating, discussing emergency procedures, just walking through it. And then we get to the point where it's time to land. And my flight lead asks, do you want to continue with this? Do you want to land, or do you want to eject? And the confidence in my voice is just, I listened to it actually not too long ago. And I just was like almost overwhelmed listening to it back. Like I was so proud of myself. That seems like a weird thing to say, but I listened to myself. I'm like, wow, like I was, and it's 20 years ago, but I was like, I was so confident in that moment of like, I had kind of processed everything in that hour on the way back. And I just thought through everything. And I got to this point where I'm confident in my decision. I am going to land this airplane.
Wow. It had to be incredible to hear that again.
It was.
So, what I found myself in, and I don't know that there's an answer to this, so no intent to put you on the spot, because I found myself asking the question, and I don't yet have an answer for it, which is, what is our human equivalent of manual reversion mode? And this is when we're in uncharted territory, dealing with high risk, and we've never been here before, and we don't know what to draw upon. Have you thought about that at all, or is there an idea for something to think about? Because there's something there.
Well, I think talking out loud here, or thinking out loud here, I think there are moments in our life where, we've prepared, we've trained. And then there are these moments, you think like, oh, that's never going to happen to me. That's going to be one of those things that I'm never going to have to deal with. And then you're on the spot, now it's that moment. It's the uncertainty. This doesn't feel quite right, but I'm going to fall back on all the work, all the training, all the hard things in my life have led me to this moment, to make a decision, to make a choice, to move forward, to take action. I feel like that's what that moment was for me. Was I 100% fully trained and prepared? No. But all the the hard things, that training, that preparation, I feel like allowed me to take action, to make a decision in a situation that I never thought I would be in, something that was just not in my sense of reality of like, that's not going to happen to me. And I just think we face these times in our lives, whether it's as a CEO or a parent. We've done our best to prepare, but sometimes we just get in these moments where we have to do the best we can based on the information we have, based on the training that we've put in. And we just have to trust ourselves and have confidence in ourselves to move forward and take action. I think that's, to me, like the best comparison I can come up with.
Cool. That's a great comparison. So the one thing I keep thinking of too, in your 12 principles for, leading without fear, leading courageously. One of them is aviate, navigate, and communicate. It seems like we have to come back to that a lot. I love those three concepts in that priority order together.
Yeah, aviate, navigate, communicate is one of these things we learned very early in our career. And it really helps us to prioritize in an emergency, under stress, in the chaos, when you're feeling overwhelmed. It is this idea of aviate, navigate, communicate. So aviate means we focus on what is most important first. In the airplane, it's flying the airplane. And then we navigate. We have a clear path. We know where we're going to go. If we have an emergency, it's the direction we're going to take. And then we communicate. We communicate with outside players. We communicate with our wingmen to say, we need help. Here's what we're going to do. Help us come up with a plan. And what I realized kind of looking back is I've used that in my life as well. I've used it especially to help me lead my teams in a crisis response. And I think back to kind of times during COVID where we were all feeling overwhelmed and stressed and so much going on, like all these external factors. And I just every now and then had to remind myself, like, let's aviate, navigate, communicate. Let's focus on what is most important, right? What is that thing that we have to keep doing, that we can't stop doing, or we potentially fail? And then navigating, right? Even if it's a crisis, we still have to have that clear path for our team. What is the direction we're going to take? What are the goals we're trying to achieve? And then communicate that plan with our team, and then not be afraid to ask for help if we need it. And it's critical in a crisis. I think that communication piece is even more critical. And it's just one of those things that I recognize it in my everyday life. When I start feeling kind of that overwhelmed, it's a way to center myself back up.
I'm envisioning and because I hang out at Harvard Business Review, the Harvard Business Review article, Aviate, Navigate, Communicate, Managing Yourself in Crisis Situations. I see that article, Kim.
All right.
And I see an entire concept on manual reversion in maybe a workshop or something like that. Remember, advice is worth what you pay.
No, I love it.
So of the 12 principles that you outline in the book, do you have a couple that you find are more important than other, or these all need to interoperate in the whole person, the whole leader?
I think to me, they're all key pieces. I don't know that one is more important than the other. There are probably moments and situations where it's more important than the other. But I really tried to find this balance of, I talk a lot about connection and human side of leadership. And this is kind of the way I see it, is that you can't have one without the other. Like, you need to be able to show warmth and connect with people and show that human side of leadership. You also need to be strong and credible and willing to make hard decisions, those tough choices. So I don't know that one's more important than the other. I think it's pulling from those things based on the situation. It's a balancing act of being able to do a lot of different things and to find that kind of that happy medium, if you will, of showing different sides as a leader.
I found as I read through them, I do think they have to interoperate. I do think they're the whole leader that you're defining there, and they're just they're powerful tools for navigating everything, including life. And the one that really jumped out at me was create your own flight plan. Only you can choose the path that is right for you.
Yeah.
Did that? Where did that come? What was the genesis of that one?
That one's an interesting one. That actually came from a letter that was written to me by the woman, the officer that commissioned me when I raised my right hand and took the oath of office as I became a second lieutenant in the Air Force. And she wrote this letter And it was so fitting. I don't even think I recognized it then, but it was just this idea of you have to choose what's right for you, create your own flight path. I got a lot of advice throughout my career. And what I realized is it was well intentioned. But in reality, you have to find what works for you, for your family. I made choices that, throughout my career that weren't always popular with my leadership. I made choices for the importance of my family and keeping my family together. I just think it's important you're going to get a lot of noise and friction and competing advice. And in the end, you need to center yourself and figure out what is most important for you, for your family, for your why, your mission, your purpose. And it is all about creating your own flight path and making those decisions and knowing what's most important.
For me as a reader, that was I think the capstone of those 12 there. I know you had Commander's Intent that followed up after that. Yeah. I'm always thinking through, I do write a lot. It's like, I probably would have flipped the order on those two, but
it's funny how many times I flipped the order.
I can imagine. I can imagine. So, just absolutely amazing. So what are you doing post U.S. Air Force? What, how do you take all of that training and background and that just living, with excitement and adrenaline, and how do you transition into, obviously raising children is one, and having a husband, that's one part of it. What's about the professional part?
Yeah, I retired 2 years ago, and my final job in the Air Force was as the director for the Center for Character and Leadership Development at the Air Force Academy. And there was something in that job and position, I realized how passionate I was about helping to inspire leaders and just share lessons and stories. This is all about, potentially this next generation of leaders. And I also realized, looking back, how critical it was when I heard other people's lessons learned and other stories. And so I really wanted to continue that. And it is hard to leave something you've done for 24 years. It was hard to separate from this mission that I felt so passionate about. But I was still confident in that decision. Seems like we keep going back to some common themes here. I just really wanted to take what I had done and try to transition that in this next chapter. So I have been doing some keynote speaking, sharing this story, sharing the lessons. I do executive coaching to help others on their leadership journey. And then I decided to write this book, which was not in my goals or dreams as a young child. And it kind of just came from this idea of sharing stories and lessons. And that has generated a lot of just opportunities to connect with people. So I'm excited about it. I work with a team called Victory Strategies. We're a leadership development firm. I've found that sense of camaraderie with the team. We're fighter pilots, we're entrepreneurs, Navy SEALs, Olympic athletes, and we all come together. We do coaching, we do keynotes and presentations, we do workshops, and we do team building. And for me, there's the idea that we never stop learning. I am learning from these teammates as well. I feel that sense of camaraderie again, but I also feel that passion and purpose. We're all focused on leadership development. And so it's been an incredible transition. I'm enjoying the next chapter. As you mentioned, I'm also enjoying having a little bit more control over my schedule in my life to spend more time with my family.
That's great. Well, the people you serve, that you're speaking to, that you're coaching, are all the better for it. And we're all the better for you creating this remarkable book. So I have a last question for you. Last one, I promise. I could keep going all day, but that's not practical. You received some advice. I think it was when you graduated from the Air Force, and I forget the exact name of the ceremony, and you received some guidance from a commissioning officer. What was that guidance, and how has it affected your life?
Well, this goes back to choosing your own flight path. This is her letting me know that, her advice was essentially, you are going to face challenges and ups and downs and different paths. And in the end, you have to choose the path that is right for you. You have to choose that path and feel confident in it. And the amazing follow on to this story is we have since recently connected again. And she was at my retirement ceremony. So to have somebody that made such an important impact as me as a young second lieutenant starting out on my career to giving me this advice that was so critical and so important. And I don't think she recognized how much of an impact it would make. But when I was really struggling throughout my career in making decisions and trying to decide which path to take, it kind of came back to this original advice of choose the path that is right for you. Only you can choose that path. And so I'm grateful for the advice. I'm grateful for that connection, and the fact that we're still connected today is pretty awesome.
Kim, what a great way to tie things off here. Thank you so much for being here. This was absolutely remarkable, and excited to hear more and learn more of what you achieve in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.